Today I'm going to share with you the pros and cons of an MFA in creative writing based on my own experience, both as a published author and as a writing coach to dozens of writers working on books, some of whom have MFAs and some of whom don't. In 2011, I quit my job as a lawyer in order to have time to write. I was committed to becoming a published author. I didn't know if I wanted to write fiction or memoir, but I knew I wanted to publish a book. I was 29 at the time, and when I had been 22, 7 years earlier, I had written down as a goal that I wanted to reach by 30, writing a book, along with learning to speak French. I hadn't learned to speak French yet, so it was time to make the book thing happen. I truly figured it would take me about a year to write a book and get a book deal. And honestly, even that sounded a little long to me, which is very funny to me now because it actually took me 6. I took writing classes back to back on everything from how to write beautiful sentences to how to write humor to how to write a book proposal. Some of these classes were great. Others were kind of discouraging, and I left them feeling worse about myself as a writer and a bit depressed. Anyway, every 2 years or so, I would have a moment of thinking, should I just do it? Should I just get an MFA? I loved school, I always had, and being a student again for something I loved as much as writing kind of sounded like a dream. So I'd go for it. I'd go through the entire process of applying. And if you've never done it, know that it is a process. You have to get recommendations, write a statement of purpose, pay about $100 per application, polish your writing samples, all for the chance of getting one in like 5 spots of a program where you know there are hundreds of people applying. I knew if I was admitted, I was gonna have to move to a distant city that wasn't currently my home city and drop tens of thousands of dollars on more education when I still had student loan debt from law school. Still, I did this 3 times. The first time, I was rejected from all but one place where I was waitlisted and then never got in. The second time, I was admitted to one school that I turned down because I got nervous about the money. And the third time, I got into a program I was really excited about, but by this time, I actually had friends who were graduating from MFA programs or who had graduated. And what I was noticing was that they were graduating, one, without having written books. And then when they did finally write their books a few years out of grad school, they were having as hard a time finding an agent as I was. Plus, a couple of them had actually graduated from their MFA programs unhappy they'd gone because it had stifled their creativity. They felt like they couldn't write anymore. That was the last thing I wanted. Having taken some non-MFA creative writing classes myself that had wound up squashing my creativity rather than the opposite, I really didn't want to do that. So in the end, I couldn't stomach signing on the dotted line and investing about $50,000, which was what this program was going to cost me for a program that I wasn't confident was going to help me enough. Luckily, I didn't have to. Eventually, I signed with my literary agent, who shortly after sold my book and then my next 2 books. And then when I realized I had some stuff to teach people following in my footsteps of wanting to be a published author, I started a writing program. So now I work with all kinds of writers, including writers who have MFAs. So all this is to say, is it worth it? What do I think are the pros and cons? Okay, first let's talk about the pros, then we're going to talk about the cons. Pro number 1 that I see. Making a commitment this large to writing leads you to take it seriously and prioritize it, which is how you find your voice. When you invest time and money in something like an MFA program, you tend to take it seriously, right? It's human nature. So committing to a graduate program is a way of dedicating yourself to be held accountable to write. That's not a small thing. I think there's tremendous value in that, and that's a major reason why I almost went. Pro number 2 is you'll have a serious writing community of talented writers and mentors. And being surrounded by people who share your same goal and who are also dedicated to it can be a really powerful thing too. So is obviously being mentored by good writers who are also good teachers. Now, do you need to spend $50,000 or more and take full loads of semester classes for this? I eventually found this community for myself, but it did take me a while. It wasn't super efficient. And pro number 3 is kind of an expired pro. This is sort of a past its due date pro. It used to be that if you wanted to teach, you should get a master's, but these days most teaching jobs at universities are given to people with PhDs, which you're not going to want to get if what you actually want to do is spend your time writing creatively and not writing about people writing creatively. The positions that are not reserved for PhDs are so competitive that masters will barely get your foot in the door, and adjunct professorships pay very little, like a couple $1,000s a semester. So just don't be fooled into thinking this degree is going to get you a salaried job you can live on, unless maybe you want to teach at a decent paying high school, in which case great, but in that case go get your master's because you want to teach in high school, not because you want to be a novelist. Now maybe it can help you get a literary agent, but honestly, if you write a good book, you're going to get a literary agent without an MFA. Everyone I know has, including myself, without an MFA. Okay, before I share the cons, I just want to do the thing where I ask you to like this video and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss great writing tips and strategies, which I share 3 times a week. Now, back to the video. Okay, now for the cons that I see working with writers every day. The first con is obvious. It's quite expensive. The average cost of an MFA in the United States is currently about $37,000 per year. At 2 to 3 years, depending on the program, that comes to nearly, if not over, $100,000. It ain't cheap. Con number 2 is that certain programs can be stifling or even crippling. One spring during the years when I was sporadically applying to MFA programs, I went to a writing residency where I met a new writer friend who happened to have gotten her MFA from what was then ranked the #1 MFA program in the country. It was fully funded. She hadn't paid a cent. She was very clear with me. It had destroyed her creatively. She said she had not written a word for years afterward. It had taken the joy out of writing for her. And in this moment when I was meeting her about a decade later, she was finally starting to write again. The story was really disturbing to me at the time, and I've now heard versions of this from several other writers. MFA programs also don't often allow, or at least don't encourage you, to write in genres, even if that's what you like. Like, you may love horror or romance and want to write those stories, which I think is a great idea since I'm a firm believer in writing what you love to read. But most MFA programs aren't going to encourage you to write in these genres. You're more likely to be pushed, however implicitly, to write in a more literary and less commercial fashion. And you might not want to do that. You know, this is a totally arbitrary feature of these programs, by the way, the underappreciation of plot. And not arbitrary, I actually think it's ultimately classism. I think genre writing and writing in general that has a great plot is as difficult to pull off as any kind of writing, and therefore equally, if not more impressive, than non-plot driven fiction, but that's another discussion for another time. And finally, con number 3, MFA programs don't usually teach you how to write a novel. If that's what you want, don't expect to learn that there. No one I know finished their MFA program having written a novel, and several people with MFAs have come to my program to learn how to write a novel, including one who's doing her MFA and my program simultaneously. So listen, you're gonna have to decide for yourself, but this is the part where I am going to invite you to check out my program, the Book Incubator, because I specifically designed it to give writers the pros of an MFA program without the cons. When I'm not writing, my mission in life is to help talented writers write their dream books. I love it. I lived for it. Because before I published my novels, I first had to figure out how to write one. And it wasn't easy because none of the writing classes I was taking either showed me how to actually write a novel. It actually wasn't until I had a newborn baby at home and only a couple hours to write every day that I came up with a real process. And the process worked. I wrote my entire novel during my 8-week maternity leave. And now I teach that process in my program, the Book Incubator. And it's worked for dozens of other writers. Like in an MFA program, you have a select community of talented writers and well-credentialed mentors. It only costs about 1/10 as much of an MFA, but it lasts a full year. And it's designed to liberate you so you can realize your unique vision and your unique voice no matter what genre you're writing. And 95% of people finish writing their books before their year in the program is complete. So if you're curious to know more, I have a free video walking you through my exact process for writing a book. You can get it by clicking below and answering 2 questions to apply to the program. You get the video whether you join or not, so no pressure to enroll. Just click below, tell me a little bit about you and your book. You can fill out a form online. I'm really excited to hear from you.